Hi, my name is Aurora, and I used to think silence meant strength, that keeping the peace was love. But then I came home, unannounced, on my daughter's birthday, and found my parents locked outside in the freezing cold. Their lips were purple, their hands shaking. Inside, my husband's family was laughing, eating cake I paid for, toasting with wine I never poured. And my daughter? She thanked Grandma Vera and Mommy. But she wasn't talking about me. How did it come to this? How do you become invisible in the house you paid for, in the life you built? And when does being quiet stop being grace and start being your own erasure? The first thing I noticed was the number of cars lined up along the curb. I pulled into the driveway slower than usual, squinting at the license plates, recognizing none of them. My mom's old beige sedan wasn't there. Neither was Dad's blue truck. I'd left work early, half a shift for once, to surprise Ellis for her birthday. I thought I'd beat the crowd. Instead, it looked like I'd missed an entire event I wasn't invited to. I grabbed the grocery bag from the passenger seat, a pint of Ellis's favorite chocolate chip ice cream, and some pink birthday napkins I'd found on sale, and walked toward the house. Something about the way the porch light wasn't on, the blinds pulled tight, and the faint bass thump of music inside. It all felt off. The kind of wrong you don't see, you just feel in your bones. When I tried the key, it didn't turn. I stood there for a beat, blinking, jiggling the lock. Then I tried again, slower this time, pressing my thumb harder into the groove. Still stuck. I let out a breath, long and annoyed. Maybe someone had locked the deadbolt from the inside, or worse, changed the lock. No, Quentin wouldn't. He wouldn't dare. I knocked twice, then 3 times. The music kept playing. Laughter, muffled but sharp, spilled through the sealed windows. Someone shouted, "Happy birthday!" followed by clapping and more laughter. I stepped back to look through the living room window. Balloons everywhere. My daughter stood near the kitchen, her little hands clasped like she was praying over a candlelit cake. Everyone in the room was focused on her. Everyone except me. I wasn't even in there. I tried calling Quentin, straight to voicemail. Again, nothing. I set the groceries down by the door and walked around the side of the house, pushing through the overgrown hedge that led toward the backyard gate. It was almost dark. The wind had picked up, slicing through my scrubs and making my skin sting. I heard something, a cough, weak and dry, like someone trying not to draw attention. That's when I saw them. My father, sitting on the concrete steps of the back porch, his jacket zipped up but his face pale and tight. My mother, curled beside him under the thin fleece blanket I'd given her last Christmas. Her lips were purple. Her eyes, usually so quick to meet mine, were barely open. Mom? Dad? They looked up slowly. My mother tried to smile, failed. "We've been out here a while," my dad said, voice raspy. They said it was too full inside." Too full? I stared at him, at both of them. "Why didn't you call me?" "We tried," my mom whispered. "Destiny took our phones when we got here, said they'd be safer inside." Destiny, Quentin's sister. Of course. I knelt down between them, my hands shaking as I pulled the blanket tighter around my mom's shoulders. She winced when I touched her. Cold skin. I didn't ask how long they'd been out there. I already knew the answer would make me scream. I helped them both up, one under each arm. My mother's body was too light. My dad was shaking hard. I led them toward the front of the house, stepping carefully along the side path while keeping them steady. When we got there, I looked again through the front window. Quentin stood near the kitchen, a beer in one hand. He laughed at something Destiny said. Vera, the queen of cool composure, clinked a glass of wine with another guest. My daughter was in the middle of them all, holding a balloon, her cheeks flushed with sugar and attention. She had no idea her grandparents were nearly frozen just outside. I looked down at the bag of groceries I'd left earlier. The ice cream had already started to melt. I picked up my phone. My hands were still trembling, but not from the cold anymore. It wasn't anger either. It was something colder, more focused. I dialed. 911, what's your emergency? My elderly parents are locked out of my house, I said. They've been outside in 30-degree weather for hours. My husband's family is inside hosting a party. My daughter's inside. I'm the homeowner. Are your parents injured? They're, they're freezing. They need medical attention. And I need officers here now. We're dispatching units to your location. Thank you. I hung up. I stood there for a moment longer, staring at my house. My house. Bought 2 years before Quentin and I even got engaged. Paid for with overtime hours, skipped lunches, missed holidays at the hospital. And now it was being used to humiliate the very people who'd raised me. I watched someone open the front door to let in another guest. They laughed as they pulled the door shut again, locking it behind them. I turned to my parents, helped them sit on the porch steps. I took off my coat and wrapped it around my mom, then knelt beside them, placing a hand on my dad's knee. They won't open the door for the woman who owns the house, I said quietly, almost to myself. But they'll have to open it for the law. The patrol car's lights painted the porch in red and blue streaks, flashing against the siding as I held my coat around my mother's shoulders. My father coughed again, short and dry, like he was trying to act stronger than he was. The officer stepped out, clipboard in hand, and nodded when he saw us. I gave him my name, address, and a quick rundown. I kept my voice low but firm, no tears, no trembling. That part of me had frozen over the moment I saw my parents shaking in the dark like unwanted guests. A few moments later, Vera opened the front door. Her hands were clasped together like she was preparing to deliver a sermon, not an explanation. "Oh dear," she said, drawing out the syllables like she'd just realized the sky was falling. "We thought they had left. It was so cold out, we didn't want to keep opening and closing the door." The officer didn't say anything right away. He looked back at me. I didn't flinch. "They've been out here for hours," I said. "They're elderly, no access to restrooms, no food, no seating. This is my home." "Well," Vera continued, not quite looking at me, "we were just overwhelmed with guests. The house was packed. We didn't want any more chaos." She gestured behind her. I caught a glimpse of my own hallway. My family pictures replaced with new frames, different faces. The music inside dimmed slightly, but the buzz of chatter still floated out. I didn't wait to be invited in. I stepped past her, brushing against her shoulder as I walked through the front door of my own house. The moment I entered, a wave of heat hit me. The scent of cake, perfume, and cheap wine hung in the air. Strangers, people I didn't recognize, stood in my kitchen, sipping from plastic cups, balancing plates of food that had been taken from my fridge. And there she was, my daughter. Ellis stood on a step stool, her cheeks red with excitement, a birthday crown on her head. Her curls bounced as she leaned over her cake, 7 candles flickering in front of her. She closed her eyes, made a wish, and blew them out. Cheers erupted. A woman I barely knew shouted, "Good job, baby girl," and snapped a photo. "Say thank you to Grandma Vera," someone called. Ellis smiled wide. "Thank you, Grandma Vera." Not Mommy. Not even a glance toward the door. I stood still for a second, taking in the scene. That cake, 3 layers, vanilla buttercream, custom-printed image of a butterfly on top, had been paid for by my mother. I had picked it up on my way home, and now it sat on my counter with a plastic sign jammed into it that read, "With love from Grandma Vera." I walked toward it. Vera must have sensed the shift in the air because she was suddenly beside me, her tone still syrupy. "It's just a detail," she said. "The child won't care who bought the cake." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not yet. I looked around again. Decorations hung across my ceiling. A banner read, "Ellis's Butterfly Bash." I never approved that theme. I had picked out pastel rainbows and gentle animals. My planning notes, weeks of ideas and Pinterest boards, had been ignored. I turned and walked down the hallway toward my bedroom, past a woman laughing too loudly and a man I'd never met helping himself to a drink from my liquor cabinet. Quentin was in the bedroom doorway, texting. When he looked up and saw me, his eyes narrowed, not in surprise, but in annoyance. "What are you doing?" he asked. "You're going to ruin the vibe." "Did you know they locked my parents outside?" I asked, my voice even. He exhaled, exasperated. "They didn't want to make a scene. It was crowded." "They're your in-laws, Quentin. They were freezing." My mother's lips were purple. He shrugged. "They could have knocked louder. Don't turn this into some emotional thing." That's when I knew. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a miscommunication or an oversight. It was intentional, and worse, it was condoned. I wasn't just being left out, I was being written out. He looked back at his phone. That's all he had for me. No apology, no remorse, not even concern. "Don't ruin the day," he said, already swiping away whatever I had just said. I walked past him and headed to the living room. A group of people were gathered around a phone, laughing at a video. I looked over someone's shoulder. Ellis was in the frame, blowing out the candles. Then she turned and shouted, "Thank you, Grandma Vera and Mommy." Everyone awed at the clip. Only I wasn't in the frame. I wasn't there when she said it, because the mommy wasn't me. The room spun a little. "Grandma Vera says I'm her special girl," Ellis squealed, running up to me with a balloon in one hand and frosting on her cheek. She wrapped her arms around my waist. "Did you see my cake?" I looked down at her. Her innocence was intact. Her joy was pure. She didn't know. She wasn't part of this. "I did," I said softly, kneeling to brush the frosting from her cheek. "It was beautiful." She leaned in and whispered, "Grandma said you didn't mind if she helped, since you're always so busy." I swallowed hard. I didn't want to ruin her moment. I didn't want her to remember her 7th birthday as the day Mommy cried in the kitchen or argued in front of everyone. But I couldn't let this go either. After she skipped back to the other kids, I walked to the hallway and grabbed my coat. My parents were still on the porch, now with emergency blankets and a thermos of tea the officers had given them. "I'm going to take you home," I told them. "We'll come back for your things later." They didn't argue. Quentin didn't follow. Vera didn't ask where we were going. And Ellis was too distracted with presents to notice me slipping out the door. As I helped my mother down the porch steps, I felt something shift. Not just in the house. In me, I had a choice to make. If I didn't reclaim my role in Ellis's life now, there might not be anything left of me in her memory later. The silence in the car wasn't just heavy, it was suffocating. I turned the heater up, but the warmth only reached our hands, not the space between us. Mom clutched Ellis's balloon in her lap like it was a fragile gift, even though it was already deflating, the glossy butterfly wings wrinkling in on themselves. Dad stared out the window. Neither of them said a word, and honestly, I couldn't blame them. What do you even say after being locked out of your daughter's house on your granddaughter's birthday? It was barely a 10-minute drive back to their apartment, but it felt like the longest trip I'd taken all year. I parked out front and helped Mom out of the car first. She didn't protest, didn't crack a joke, didn't even look me in the eye. That hurt more than if she'd yelled at me. Dad followed slowly behind. When I reached to steady him on the sidewalk, he didn't shake me off, but he didn't thank me either, just gave a soft grunt and nodded. "I'll call you tomorrow," I said, though I didn't know if I meant it. He didn't answer. Just shuffled toward the front steps, one arm around Mom's shoulder. Watching their backs as they disappeared into that dim little building, something in me cracked. This wasn't just shame, this was regret. Regret for not seeing it sooner, for allowing it all to escalate this far, for trusting the wrong people for far too long. On the way home, I took the long route. I wasn't ready to go back to the house, not just yet. I drove past the corner where Quentin had first kissed me, the grocery store where we used to shop with Ellis in the cart seat, swinging her legs and babbling nonsense. All those memories used to make me smile. Now they felt like someone else's life, some girl who hadn't figured out yet that kindness wasn't always returned. Back at the house, the party had ended. The cars were gone. The trash bins were full. The hallway smelled like leftover frosting and perfume. I walked into the kitchen and found the cake's remnants, 3 slices left, one with a finger swipe across the top, probably Vera's. She never used serving tools when she could use her own hands. I threw it in the trash. The next morning, I sat alone at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee. Ellis was still sleeping upstairs, and Quentin had gone out for a run that I didn't believe for a second. I stared at the window, trying to make sense of what exactly had broken inside me. Then I remembered our wedding. It was like someone lit a projector inside my brain and played the memory on a loop. Me in my dress, secondhand but altered perfectly, smiling through the nerves. Vera beside me, adjusting the veil, complimenting me loud enough for others to hear, then leaning in close so only I could catch her real words. "You're lucky he married you, you know? Not every man would take on a single mom with a night shift schedule." I'd blinked, smiled like I didn't hear it. Because what else could I do? Call her out on the spot and cause a scene at my own wedding? I brushed it off then, told myself it was just a slip. A moment of misplaced pride from a woman who didn't know better. But it wasn't a slip. It was a signal. And now, years later, the message was clear. I had never been family. Not really. I had been tolerated, handled, and now erased. I walked into the laundry room and pulled out the box of old keepsakes I kept on the shelf. Wedding cards, baby shower invitations, ultrasound photos, a copy of the marriage license. As I sifted through it, my hand landed on a folded napkin with the words, "Welcome to the Thompson family," printed in gold. I stared at it for a long time. It might as well have said, "Welcome to the illusion." Later that afternoon, while Ellis played in her room, I sat Quentin down in the living room. I needed to say something, anything. "Why didn't you tell your mom to let my parents in?" I asked. He didn't even look up from his phone. "It was a full house," he said. "And your dad always brings tension. I didn't want drama on her birthday." I stared at him. "Drama is locking my parents outside in freezing weather. They could have come in through the back," he mumbled. "They did. The door was locked." He shrugged. "Look, can we not turn this into a thing? It's over. The party's done. Let it go." Let it go. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I pushed it down. Not yet. Not in front of him. He didn't deserve to see me fall apart. "I asked you weeks ago if they could stay for the weekend," I said, keeping my voice low. "You said, 'Your parents aren't my responsibility.'" He paused, then nodded. "Yeah, and they're not—" "Look, Aurora, you knew what you were getting into. We agreed early on. My family would be more involved with Ellis. They're just more available." "No," I corrected him. "You decided that. You let them take over, and I went along with it because I was too tired to fight. And now look where we are." He stood up, grabbed his keys. "I'm not doing this. Not after the party. I'm going to get lunch." The door slammed behind him. That night, after Ellis went to bed, I opened the fridge to grab a bottle of water and noticed one of her drawings hanging on the freezer door. I didn't remember putting it there. It must have been Vera or Isolde. It was a stick figure family. 4 people. Ellis, with curly hair and a big smile. Quentin with his beard. Vera, drawn with a crown. Isolde with sparkly shoes. All holding hands. No mommy. Not even a shadow. I stared at that picture until my vision blurred. Then I reached up and pulled it down, folded it once, then again, and slid it into the junk drawer without a word. I wasn't just being left out of the room, I was being written out of the story. I didn't cry when I took down Ellis's drawing. I didn't scream or throw it or rip it into pieces. I folded it once, twice, and slid it into the drawer next to the kitchen scissors. That drawer had always been the catch-all for loose batteries, coupons I never used, spare rubber bands. It felt like the right place for a memory that hurt too much to display, but felt too sacred to throw away. The next day was a Monday, and after dropping Ellis at school, I clocked in for my shift at the hospital. My body moved through the motions, charts, patients, rounds, but my mind was stuck. I couldn't unsee that drawing, couldn't unhear her voice saying, "Thank you, Grandma Vera and Mommy," in that birthday video. I'd watched it again before bed the night before, replayed it until my phone battery ran out, and every time, I waited for her to look for me in the crowd. Every time, she didn't. By lunchtime, I was still distracted. That's when my coworker, Patrice, slid her phone across the table toward me. "Your girl's famous," she said with a chuckle. "Look!" I looked down and froze. It was a Facebook post from Vera's account. The caption read, "3 generations of love. Ellis is lucky to have such a family." The picture? Vera holding Ellis on her hip, beaming. Quentin stood next to them, one arm around Isolde, the other raised in a half cheers with a plastic champagne flute. Ellis had cake on her nose and a smile stretched across her whole face. I wasn't in it. Neither were my parents. Not a tag. Not a mention. Nothing. They'd all been standing in my kitchen, in a house I paid for, celebrating a birthday I'd planned to take off work for. And I was as absent from the documentation as if I'd never existed. "Did you see this already?" Patrice asked gently. I handed her the phone back. "Yeah, I did." She paused, probably expecting more. I didn't give it. I packed up my lunch and left the break room. By the time I got home, Vera and Isolde were in the living room, watching some home renovation show. The volume was too loud. Quentin was upstairs, shower running. "Hey, Aurora," Isolde said without looking up. "Didn't know you were off early." I didn't respond. I walked past them, down the hallway toward the stairs. My feet moved without my brain's permission. At the top of the stairs, I heard the water shut off, followed by Quentin's usual post-shower cough. In our bedroom, the air smelled different. Not bad, just not mine, like someone else had been there. Vera's shoes were by the bed, the ones with the loud wooden heels she always kicked off without care. Isolde's perfume bottle, expensive and loud, sat on my vanity. My lotions had been moved to a basket on the floor. I opened the closet. My clothes had been shifted to the far side. A new organizer had been installed, Quentin's doing, I assumed, but now Vera's jackets were hanging next to mine. That was the moment something snapped, not with rage, but with realization. This wasn't just inconvenience anymore. This was encroachment. This was conquest. I stood there for several minutes, breathing in the unfamiliar scent of my own room, wondering when exactly I'd been demoted from owner to occupant. At dinner, I didn't wait for a perfect moment. We sat around the table, Quentin, Ellis between us, Vera at the head, Isolde scrolling on her phone. A casserole sat in the center of the table, something Vera had made that I wasn't asked about. "Can I say something?" I asked. Vera looked up, startled but composed. Quentin didn't even pause chewing. "I'd like us to remember that this is my house," I said calmly. "I pay the mortgage. I bought it before Quentin and I got married. I've welcomed everyone here. But lately, I've been feeling like a guest in my own home." Vera blinked. "We're just trying to help, honey." Isolde smirked, without looking up. "We could leave if it's such a burden." "No one said that," Quentin interjected, mouth still full. "God, can we not do this over dinner?" I pushed my plate away. "If you keep treating me like I don't belong here, don't be surprised when I stop opening the door." That got their attention. Vera's fork clinked against her plate. Quentin stared at me like I'd just insulted his mother, which, in a way, I had. Isolde finally looked up from her phone. "You've always been so dramatic," she said, her voice coated in faux concern. "This martyr thing is exhausting." I stood up. "And yet here you all are, eating my food, sleeping under my roof, pretending you built the walls around you." Quentin slammed his napkin down. "You're blowing everything out of proportion again, just like always." I walked out of the dining room without another word. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of my bed, the bed Vera had clearly napped on recently, judging by the dent in the pillow that wasn't mine, and stared at the family photo on the dresser. It had been taken 3 years ago, at a pumpkin patch. Just the 3 of us. Quentin, me, Ellis in a red jacket. We were smiling, all of us. Now I couldn't remember the last time we looked like a family. Downstairs, the voices rose again, Vera and Quentin in some low conversation I couldn't hear fully, followed by Isolde laughing. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. They thought I'd never bite back because I'd always swallowed the hurt. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was crying or pacing or staring at the ceiling in anguish. No, I was wide awake with clarity. It was like a fog that had been sitting over my chest for months, years maybe, had finally lifted, and I could see every single pattern, every slight, every dismissal, every carefully constructed excuse to push me aside in my own life. By sunrise, I had a plan. I made coffee. Strong. I didn't add sugar. I gathered every document I'd ever kept related to the house, mortgage statements, closing paperwork, the utility bills in my name, the deed that had my name and only my name typed across the top. I slipped them all into a folder and placed it on the kitchen table. Then I sat down and waited. It was nearly 9 a.m. when the knock came. The same officer from the other night stood at the door, his partner beside him. "We received a request for a follow-up," he said. "To confirm everything was resolved?" I gestured for them to come inside. Vera appeared from the hallway, a plate of muffins in her hand like she'd just walked off a commercial. Her smile was polished to perfection, warm and rehearsed. "Officers," she said cheerfully, "you'll have to excuse the misunderstanding from before. We were simply overwhelmed." It was a family party. Emotions ran high. But it's all settled now. Isn't that right, Aurora? I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the folder and slid the papers across the counter. "This is my home," I said. "I bought it in 2017. Alone. I've paid every bill. I'm the only legal homeowner. I'd like that to be acknowledged. On record." The officers exchanged a quick glance. One of them flipped through the documents, nodding slowly. "You live here full-time?" the officer asked Vera. "Oh, just temporarily," she replied, her tone shifting slightly. "Helping out with the little one. You know how it is." "Temporary guests," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "Uninvited ones." Quentin had come down by then, rubbing sleep from his eyes and already annoyed. "Are we seriously doing this? Over what? A cold evening?" I turned toward him. "Over my parents being locked out of their daughter's home while strangers toasted champagne in her kitchen." "They could have knocked," he said dismissively. "They did," I snapped. "They knocked, they called, and your sister took their phones. You want to act like this isn't serious? That's on you. But I won't be gaslit into believing what happened was a simple mix-up." Vera's face had drained of its charm by now. She looked between the officers and me, her lips thinning. "Let me be clear," one of the officers said carefully, handing the papers back. "You're well within your rights, and we've documented the incident for the record. If you feel unsafe or that your property is being disrespected, you're entitled to take next steps, legal or otherwise." "Thank you," I said. The officers left. No muffins were accepted. Quentin didn't speak to me for the next 2 hours. When he did, it wasn't an apology. "You didn't have to make it a whole show," he muttered, folding laundry in the living room like it somehow gave him moral high ground. "You love attention when you get to be the victim." I paused in the hallway, leaned against the doorway. "Let me ask you something," I said. "If my parents had done that to your mom, left her outside in 30-degree weather, stripped her of her dignity in front of her grandchild, would you be calling it a show?" He didn't answer. "Exactly," I said. "You can stop folding now. I'll finish it." That night, after Ellis went to sleep, I grabbed a large box from the basement, one we usually used for Christmas decorations, and carried it upstairs to our bedroom. I opened the closet. Vera's jackets, her shoes under the bed, her robe on the hook behind the door, Isolde's perfume, makeup, even her flat iron on the bathroom sink. Piece by piece, I packed it all. Then I placed the box outside the guest room, alongside a handwritten note. "This house doesn't have room for people who erase others." I left it unsigned. The next morning, Vera didn't say anything, but her things were gone by noon. Isolde followed shortly after, her car peeling out of the driveway without so much as a glance back through the rearview mirror. Quentin found me in the kitchen while I was prepping dinner. He leaned against the counter with that smug calm he always used when he thought I was being too emotional. "You could have just asked," he said. "Asked?" He nodded. "You didn't need to pull the cop card. You didn't need to humiliate my mother." "Did she hesitate to humiliate mine?" I asked. Again, no answer. Just that infuriating silence he always used when cornered. "You know what your problem is?" he said after a beat. "You're too sensitive. You take everything so personally." I set the knife down and looked at him, really looked. "And you take nothing personally, which is exactly why we're here." He left the room. I didn't chase him. Later, after Ellis was tucked in and the house had quieted down to the familiar creaks and hums of a settling structure, I walked the hallway alone. The air smelled like my shampoo again. The thermostat was finally set to the temperature I preferred. No extra slippers by the door. No cloying scent of someone else's presence. I stood in the doorway of the guest room, now empty. Just a freshly made bed and a folded towel. It looked peaceful, but more than that, it looked like mine, They thought I'd never speak because I'd always made room, because I was taught to be polite, because I smiled through discomfort and called it grace. But here's the thing about grace, it ends where survival begins. You want to play pretend queen in my house? Then be prepared when the throne gets pulled out from under you. The next morning didn't feel like a new day. It felt like a continuation of the night before, only this time the silence was heavier. Not the awkward kind, but the type that comes when everyone knows something is about to change, and no one wants to say it out loud. The sun hadn't fully risen yet when I got out of bed. Quentin was still sleeping, sprawled across the mattress like he'd earned it. I moved quietly through the room, not out of courtesy, but because I didn't want to waste energy. I had things to do, final lines to draw. Downstairs, I made coffee and opened the drawer where I'd stashed every financial document I could find over the last few months. I laid everything out on the kitchen table: mortgage paperwork, property tax statements, even the monthly utility bills that bore only my name. I clipped them all neatly into a binder I'd labeled in thick black marker, boundaries. And taped to the front was the receipt I'd found tucked under the party supply pile in the garage, a receipt for the catering and decorations ordered by Vera. On it, in elegant script, was the line item: Hostess, Vera Thompson. That was the spark. It wasn't just her taking credit. It was her rewriting the story again, hosting a party for my daughter in my home with no mention of me. That receipt didn't just offend me, it confirmed what I already knew. They didn't just want space in my home, they wanted the narrative too. I flipped open my laptop and searched, how to evict family members from your home. Within minutes, I found a local lawyer's website offering free templates and advice. Everything was clear. If they weren't on the lease and I had proof of ownership, I could request formal removal. The only question was, did I want to wait? The answer came when I walked past the front door and saw it. A new sign, hung right above the welcome mat. Thompson Residence. It hadn't been there yesterday. I stared at it for a long moment. Not angry, not shocked, just resolved. I picked up my phone and dialed. 911, what's your emergency? My name is Aurora Davis. I'm the sole legal owner of the property at this address. My husband's family has refused to leave despite multiple requests. I would like officers to assist in their formal removal. We're dispatching a unit now, the dispatcher confirmed. I didn't flinch. I didn't pace. I simply went back to the kitchen and placed the binder squarely on the counter. When the officers arrived 20 minutes later, I met them at the door, calm and collected. Vera opened the hallway closet just as I was leading them in, holding a box of her scarves like she hadn't just claimed dominion over my entire front porch. Again? She said, half laughing, half sighing. No, Mrs. Thompson, one officer said, reviewing the documents I'd provided. This time, it's not a courtesy check. Ms. Davis is the homeowner. You and your family are here as guests who've been asked to leave. Quentin came down the stairs, barefoot, wiping his face like he'd just woken up to the news of a lifetime. Seriously? He said, voice rough with sleep and disbelief. You called the cops again? I didn't bother answering. The officers did it for me. She's within her legal rights, one of them said, handing the documents back to me with a nod. We'll give you all 48 hours to vacate the property. That includes personal belongings. After that, it becomes a trespassing issue. Vera's composure finally cracked. You're tearing this family apart, she hissed, her eyes darting between me and the officer. I looked her squarely in the eye. You already did, when you locked mine in the cold. For once, she didn't have a comeback. Quentin tried stepping in, his voice low but insistent. Come on, Aurora. You really think this is the answer? No, I said, my voice level. I think this is the boundary. There's a difference. The rest of the day passed in a blur of boxes, heavy silences, and awkward maneuvering. Vera packed loudly, making sure each drawer she slammed, each cabinet she opened, echoed like a final insult. Isolde didn't even say goodbye. She just left a note on the counter. You're bitter, and you'll regret this. I laughed when I read it, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. That evening, the house was finally quiet. No perfume lingering in the hallways, No voices whispering in the guest room, no passive-aggressive sighs over dinner. Just me, Ellis, and the kind of peace I'd almost forgotten existed. I bathed her, helped her into her pajamas, and laid beside her while she picked a bedtime story. She chose the one about the girl who planted a garden in a junkyard, who turned broken ground into blooming color. "Will Grandma Vera be here tomorrow?" she asked halfway through the story. I took a breath, held it, let it out slow. "No, sweetheart," I said. "She won't." She looked at me, wide-eyed, waiting. "Grandma will always love you," I continued, choosing every word carefully. "But sometimes, people who love us don't know how to treat everyone kindly, and that's not okay." Ellis nodded like she understood more than I expected. Then she tucked her blanket tighter under her chin and leaned into me. "I like it when it's just us," she whispered. I kissed her forehead, swallowed the emotion rising in my chest, and stayed beside her until she drifted off. I walked back downstairs and turned off the lights room by room, pausing at the front door, the same door that had once opened to anyone with a smile and a story. Now it was mine to guard. The door that had always opened for everyone was now mine to close. I had just finished loading the dishwasher and wiping down the counter when I heard soft footsteps padding down the hallway. The light from the oven clock read 8:42 p.m. Ellis peeked around the corner, her bunny tucked under one arm, her curls frizzy from sleep. "Baby," I said gently, "you should be in bed." She shuffled toward me, her eyes a little watery but clear. "Can I sleep with you tonight?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. "Of course." I turned off the kitchen lights, grabbed her water bottle, and walked with her back to the bedroom. She climbed into my side of the bed and pulled the comforter up to her chin. I lay beside her, running my hand softly down her hair, trying to settle my breathing to match hers. That's when she whispered it. "Mom, do you hate Grandma Vera?" I didn't react right away. My stomach tightened. My fingers paused mid-stroke through her hair. I knew better than to overreact. Kids notice tone more than words. "Why do you ask that?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "She said you don't let her help anymore," Ellis replied. "She said you make her feel like a stranger." And there it was, the last thread Vera had managed to weave before she left. Poison disguised as hurt feelings. I exhaled slowly and pulled her closer. "I don't hate Grandma Vera," I said carefully. "But sometimes, when people say things that hurt others, we have to make space to protect the ones we love, even if that means a little distance." Ellis was quiet for a while. Then she whispered, "I like it better now. It's not so noisy." I kissed the top of her head. "Me too." The next morning, while Ellis got ready for school, I scrolled through my email. A message from one of my old coworkers popped up. D, someone I hadn't seen in over a year. The subject line read, "Small World." Inside was a screenshot from a mutual acquaintance's Facebook post. The caption was innocent enough. "Catching up with Quentin today. Can't believe he bought that beautiful house all by himself. Man of the year." My fingers stiffened over the keyboard. Bought it all by himself. That house had been mine long before Quentin and I even started dating. I'd signed the papers alone, with my daughter on my hip and a pen shaking in my hand. I'd paid every closing cost, every tax bill, every late-night emergency call to the plumber. And now he was strolling around claiming ownership like it was a trophy he'd earned. I replied to Dee's message with only 2 words. "Call me." Then I went straight to my filing cabinet, pulled out the house deed, and took a photo. Later that day, when I picked Ellis up from school, Quentin was already home. He was on the back deck, grilling, wearing that smug, relaxed expression he always wore when he thought he'd gotten away with something. "You're in a good mood," I said, stepping onto the patio. He didn't turn around. "I had a great lunch, ran into a couple old friends." "Did they congratulate you?" I asked, feigning curiosity. He glanced at me. "Yeah, why?" "Because you told them you bought the house," I said, handing him my phone with the screenshot. "Which is funny considering your name isn't even on the deed." He looked at the screen, blinked, and handed the phone back. "It's not a big deal," he said flatly. I tilted my head. "Really? You told people you paid for a house you never put a dime toward." "I live here, don't I?" he said, setting the tongs down a little harder than necessary. What difference does it make? It makes a difference because lying about ownership is lying about me, about what I've done, about what I built. He shrugged. You're being dramatic again. I folded my arms. No, I'm done being quiet. He turned away, flipping a burger. This isn't a courtroom, Aurora. Actually, I said, it might be. He spun around. Are you threatening to sue me now? I'm warning you, I said calmly. If you continue to spread lies about me, I'll do whatever it takes to correct the record, publicly, legally, whatever it takes. You're making this a war. No, I said, my voice dropping to a steady rhythm. You made this a war when you erased my name from my own life. He scoffed and turned back to the grill, but I could see the stiffness in his shoulders, the tension in his jaw. Later that evening, after dinner, I sat with Ellis on the couch while she colored. Quentin paced the upstairs hallway, avoiding eye contact, his footsteps betraying his unease. Ellis held up her drawing. It's our house, she said proudly. Just us now. There were two figures, me and her. A garden in front, a sun overhead. No Vera, no Quentin, just us. I smiled and hugged her tight. You know what I love most about this picture? I asked. She nodded. It's quiet. That night, I folded the deed and tucked it into the front of my binder, the same one labeled Boundaries. Then I placed it on my nightstand, right where I could see it every morning. You thought I wouldn't fight because I stayed quiet, but I was quiet because I was building the case. The morning after the confrontation was quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It felt permanent. Quentin didn't come downstairs. He'd slept in the guest room the night before. Not that we'd argued, not out loud. But sometimes silence between two people is louder than a fight. Sometimes it says, I don't care enough to fix this. And that kind of apathy cuts deeper than any insult. I dropped Ellis off at school, packed her a little note in her lunchbox that read, You are brave and you are kind, and kissed her forehead before watching her walk in through the glass doors. Then I went straight to my lawyer's office. I didn't fidget. I didn't hesitate. I didn't second guess. I signed the divorce papers with a hand steady enough to surprise even me. We attached everything, copies of texts where Quentin belittled my parents, screenshots of social media posts where Vera claimed ownership over events I paid for, the deed in my name, the video of Ellis's birthday where I wasn't even mentioned, and the photo of my parents wrapped in blankets on the back porch. The attorney looked over the stack, then at me. This is solid, she said. It's more than enough. I nodded. I want sole custody. She didn't flinch. We'll go for it. By that afternoon, Quentin had the papers in his hands. He stormed into the bedroom, waving them like he'd just discovered a betrayal, not like he was the one who caused one. You'll regret this, he hissed. You're destroying this family. I folded the laundry on the bed calmly without looking up. It's already destroyed. I'm just walking out of the rubble. He slammed the papers on the dresser. You really think they'll give you full custody? You think I'm just gonna let you take her? I reached under the stack of jeans and pulled out the folder. Evidence neatly tabbed, printed, time-stamped. I handed it to him without a word. He flipped through the first few pages, eyes narrowing. Then he walked out. That night, I cooked dinner for Ellis and me. Mac and cheese, broccoli. She wanted to light a candle at the table, like we do at restaurants. I let her. Why not? It was the first dinner in weeks that didn't feel like walking on eggshells. While she colored after her bath, I scrolled through my phone and saw it. Vera's Facebook had been updated. Not by her, but by the absence of her friends. Posts gone. Comments removed. The photo of Ellis's birthday deleted entirely. Then a message from a former neighbor popped up in my inbox. I heard what happened to your folks at the party. I'm so sorry. That wasn't right. It wasn't just that people were noticing, it was that they were finally speaking up. And then came the email. A vendor Vera often worked with sent a message to multiple people. Due to recent concerns about professionalism and conduct, we will no longer be accepting referrals from Vera Thompson. I stared at the screen. There it was. The consequence. Not because I shouted, not because I sought revenge, but because sometimes the truth, when it surfaces, carries its own weight. Quentin, for his part, lost 2 freelance contracts the same week. One client cited unsettling dynamics at home after a mutual acquaintance forwarded that same screenshot of him claiming to have bought the house. That lie burned fast and loud. By the time our court hearing came, I was tired, but clear. In the courtroom, I didn't perform. I didn't sob. I didn't rehearse a speech. I told the judge simply, I'm not trying to erase my daughter's family. I'm trying to show her that love doesn't look like control, or silence, or shame. Quentin tried to counter with a few weak anecdotes, how I worked long hours, how Ellis missed him when he wasn't home. But the judge had seen enough. He ruled in my favor. Full custody. Supervised visitation only. Quentin slumped in his chair. No Vera, no Isolde, not even a show of support. He was alone. I walked out of the courtroom with Ellis's name on the paper and my dignity intact. Later that evening, I picked Ellis up from school. We stopped by the bakery she liked and shared a cupcake in the front seat of the car. She didn't ask about her dad, she didn't mention her grandmother, she just talked about music class and how she wanted to play the drums even though her teacher said she wasn't ready yet. You don't have to be ready, I told her. You just have to start. When we got home, I stood in the doorway for a long time before going in. The house felt like mine again, not just because of the deed, but because the air didn't carry their judgment. The rooms weren't filled with shadows that didn't belong. Ellis ran up the stairs to change into her pajamas. I stood at the bottom step, one hand on the railing, one hand still holding her empty cupcake wrapper. I didn't just win custody of my daughter, I reclaimed custody of myself. Saturday mornings had taken on a different rhythm now. No more doors slamming at sunrise, no more Vera clanking dishes like she was auditioning for martyrdom. Just Ellis and me, barefoot in the kitchen, flipping pancakes while sunlight poured through the blinds like an old friend finally returning home. She stood on her step stool, spatula in hand, squinting at the griddle like a scientist observing an experiment. "Mom," she said, poking a half-cooked pancake with too much confidence. "I think this one's ready." I leaned over to check, nodding. "Not bad, chef." She giggled and handed over the spatula like she'd just passed down a sacred family tradition. I flipped the pancake, set it on a plate, and slid it across the counter toward her. She doused it in syrup, completely ignoring the butter. It was a quiet breakfast, not because we didn't have anything to say, but because there was no need to say anything. Sometimes, peace sounds like syrup dripping onto a plate, or the hum of the fridge in the background. And sometimes, peace feels like 2 hands, one big, one small, resting side by side without holding on for dear life. After we cleaned up, Ellis went to draw in the living room while I tackled some weekend organizing. That's when I found it. Again. The drawing. The one I thought I'd thrown away. It had somehow slipped behind the refrigerator and survived every purge. Crumpled, stained, but still intact. 4 stick figures, none of them me. I sat at the table and unfolded it slowly, like peeling back the edge of an old wound. I remembered Ellis telling me, not long after she drew it, "Grandma said you didn't love me enough to stay home." At the time, I'd brushed it off, told myself she didn't mean it, that maybe Ellis had misunderstood. But looking at the drawing again, I knew better. That wasn't misunderstanding, that was manipulation. And it had worked. For a while. I stood, walked to the sink, and turned on the burner of the stove. Not in anger, not in spite, but for closure. I held the paper over the flame and watched it curl, blacken, and finally dissolve into ash. It didn't fix everything, but it freed something. Later that day, I was sorting through an old gift bag from Ellis's birthday party, one I'd shoved into the closet months ago, too emotionally exhausted to deal with at the time. At the bottom was a folded guest list, handwritten by Isolde. I scanned the names, every cousin, every church friend, every neighbor from Quentin's side. Nowhere on that list were the names Jareth or Marina. My parents, not invited, not included, not forgotten, deliberately erased. The weight in my chest returned. Not heavy, not crushing, just familiar. I sat down and texted my mom. You deserved better. I should have seen it sooner. I'm sorry. Her reply came minutes later. You saw it when it mattered. The rest of the day moved quietly. Ellis built a fort out of couch cushions, and I let her leave it up even though it blocked half the living room. I didn't care. That fort was hers. That mess was ours. Sometime around dusk, as I folded laundry in my room, my phone buzzed with a headline notification. Local influencer Vera Thompson removed from community board amid controversy. I didn't click it. I didn't need to. The video of Ellis's birthday had made its rounds, so had the stories. People talked. Word spread. Actions, it turns out, carry their own kind of volume. Vera had moved in with a cousin 2 states away. Her church friends stopped calling. Events she once emceed now had new hosts. Her name, once said with admiration in certain circles, had become a cautionary tale. Quentin lived in a 1-bedroom near the freeway now. I'd seen a picture of it on Zillow once. The reviews mentioned thin walls and bad plumbing. He called Ellis sometimes, not often. She didn't ask for him much. Isolde had gone from self-proclaimed lifestyle brand ambassador to a sales associate at a mall boutique. Her Instagram turned quiet. The curated world she'd tried to build collapsed under its own falseness. None of them apologized, and that, strangely, was okay. Life didn't hand me an apology wrapped in ribbon, but it did hand me room to breathe, and that was more useful. That night, I tucked Ellis into bed. She clutched her stuffed bunny, the same one she'd had since she was 2. Its fur was matted, one ear half torn, but she still refused to sleep without it. As I pulled the blanket up over her shoulders, she reached out and touched my face. "You're my favorite part of every day," she whispered. I froze for a moment, then smiled. "That's all I ever wanted to be," I said. She drifted off not long after, her breath soft and even. I sat beside her for a while, listening to the quiet. Not the kind that comes when someone leaves, but the kind that stays. I walked downstairs, made myself tea, and curled up on the couch with a blanket. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows. Inside, the silence was full, not empty. Not every battle ends with a loud victory. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is reclaim what was always yours. And sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is stop asking for permission. I didn't win by yelling louder. I won by finally deciding my voice mattered. Sometimes, the people who smile the widest at your table are the ones slowly pulling the chair out from under you. Aurora's story isn't just about betrayal. It's about reclaiming power, boundaries, and self-worth. Have you ever felt like a guest in your own life? When did you finally decide enough was enough? If this story moved you, subscribe for more true family dramas, betrayal, and healing. Let's talk in the comments. Your story might just help someone else find their voice.